We have EbaNee Bond with us from the University of Akron Research Foundation, and she is going to be talking about the business model canvas and growing your business. And so we're glad to have her presenting today, and we can go ahead and get started. There's going to be some time for question and answers at the end, so you can use the little chat there and put any questions there, and we will go over them from the end.
Cool.
So thanks, EbaNee.
All right, well, thank you, Gianna, for inviting us to put on this workshop. Really appreciate it. Also, Elyse Ball, who is my colleague extraordinaire, will also be presenting a little bit and then also helping to answer any questions. So at this point, I'll actually let Elyse take it from here and just describe a little bit about UR before we jump into the presentation and give you a little bit of context of how we help entrepreneurs.
All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. I know that you can't see me, and I'm working through my technical issues, but you probably don't need to see me at the moment, because you're looking at some lovely slides about the UA Research Foundation. But just to start things off, EbaNee and I had wanted to share a little bit about University of Akron Research Foundation and what it is that we do. So you can see, we have a continuum of programming for startup founders, entrepreneurs, and we particularly tend to focus on earlier stage entrepreneurs, so people who are near the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey. And a couple of those programs that we wanted to particularly highlight were the Starting Line program, the I-Core program, which build off of the business model canvas that we're going to be walking through today. And I think there might be a more detailed slide on those coming up in a second.
Okay.
So at a high level, how we help, we are for driven creators, researchers, and problem solvers. So we don't necessarily think of ourselves as helping purely entrepreneurs, because we know not everybody necessarily identifies as an entrepreneur at the earlier stages of their journey, but we're looking for people who have identified a problem and really want to dig in on it and are passionate about solving the problem for their customers or their end users, whoever that might be. We provide structured mentorship-driven programming. Most of our programs are cohort-based. Some of them, like Starting Line, are self-paced, but in every case, there's really structure around what we're doing and why we're doing it. And our focus is on what's going to happen right after the business model canvas that you'll hopefully be filling out along with us today, which is customer discovery, which is really interacting with your customers to avoid that number one reason that startups fail, which is we think that we're building the right thing for our customers. We think we found a really serious problem. And then as we dig in on it, what we find out is that we maybe haven't quite properly characterized that problem, or we don't really understand our customers as well as we would like to. So understanding what our customer really needs based on the hypotheses on our business model canvas is really where we dig in on everything. So the Starting Line program, as I mentioned, it's a self-paced, online-based program. It's 5 steps, and it walks through some of the key business model concepts. One of our goals with that process is to help people put together better applications for the I-Core program. And another one of our goals is to help people just assess an early stage business idea and hopefully decide within 10 hours whether this is something that they ought to be spending more time on, or whether they ought to wait for their next great idea to come along, because we know most entrepreneurs have plenty of ideas to work on. So helping to vet through those and pick the one you want to spend a lot of time on. Starting Line is great for that. And the I-Core program is really our core program and what we tend to assist the most companies through. We have about 50 teams participate per year over the course of 3 cohorts. So we run it in the spring, summer, and fall. It's a 7-week process. It focuses again on direct customer interaction as a way to confirm or refute the hypotheses you have on your business model canvas. Most teams complete a minimum of 20 customer interviews as part of that program. And we have one kicking off this Friday, but if you're interested potentially in participating in the future, We also already have the application up and available on our website to participate in the fall program, which kicks off the first week in October. Oh, and then I guess one more program that I'll just touch on very briefly, for companies that are quite a lot further along and that are working on hard technologies. So a complement to YBI, which works a lot in the software space, although I know you also do a lot of work with additive manufacturing. But for companies that have a hard tech, a physical high-tech product, we have a more intensive 5-month accelerator program that works with companies at that later stage. As a follow-on to ICOR and some of our other programming.
All right, thank you. So that's a little bit about UARF and how we engage with companies with, at least with assisting them in a programmatic way. So I'll go ahead and just kick off our presentation today, which is to learn about how the business model canvas is used as a template to develop and document the rationale of how your business creates and efficiently delivers value to your customers. So why even bother with the business model canvas? A lot of people will think that they need to form their business plan, but a business plan a lot of times is based on hidden assumptions. So you have these ideas about why your business will work. It's the best idea ever. You're gonna put in a business plan. You maybe even get a loan, debt to start this business. And then your customers are like, nope, we don't like that business plan. So a quote that UARF uses is, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that actually is from Mike Tyson. So we encourage you to use the business model canvas to be succinct and get your ideas out. And it's something that you can evolve over time and hopefully will help you actually create a more factual business plan. Throughout the process, I encourage people to keep their vision in mind. So you want to keep your why, but change the how to get there. So even if you're driving, let's say from Akron to Columbus, you have different routes to get there, but what you really want to do is use the one, take the one that uses the least amount of time, effort, and resources to get there. And then I put a little map of me going from Akron to YBI. But obviously, even with the YBI one, I want to take the one that's 44 minutes versus the one that's an hour and 11, or even if I imagine if I change the method by which I got there, walking, it might only be one path, which it was. So be open to change. Having an innovation mindset is all about believing that change can happen, but also knowing that it will, as far as realizing your vision. So how do you actually get to realize your vision? What mindset does it take? You have to be open to growing and learning. You have to be resilient. That is a part of growth. Failing and learning from failure. And then figuring out what you can do what can you do better, having learned, like, okay, what maybe led to failure. You have to be creative, imagine new things, be resourceful. I like to say, make $1 out of 15 cents. My next and favorite part of entrepreneurship is being empathetic and honest. You really have to listen to your customers, and you should know them like so well that you create the best solution for them. You have to be determined, obviously, decisive, use facts to figure out how to solve problems and organize which problems you should solve. And then Elyse, definition of an entrepreneur is someone who does things. So you do things and you learn by experimenting. That's what differentiates you from a dreamer and a doer. So as a startup, by actual definition, is a temporary organization used to search for a repeatable, scalable, and profitable business model. When you start off, it's just a faith-based initiative. You have a set of beliefs about why it will work. But hopefully, through the methods that we'll talk to today, you'll be able to actually turn those hypotheses into facts, and you'll be able to execute on those facts. So the first step you want to do is actually organize your faith-based hypotheses into a business model. And you do that through using the business model canvas. So I have a question, actually. If somebody in the chat would say, hopefully not a lot of people are familiar with this, but what do you guess to be the maybe one or top two things you should focus on first in your business, and what's maybe the last thing that you should be worried about as far as your business strategy from the 9 components listed here? So what are the first 2 that you think you should focus on? Okay. And then maybe the last one you should focus on. Okay. Okay. So I like to get an idea of, where people are thinking about it. I'm assuming that these ones are the first ones that you focus on that you're writing. So the okay, number 1 value prop. I see somebody else put number 1 value prop. Okay, so once you've gotten your beliefs out onto the business model canvas, the first ones that you should actually focus on, drum roll. Okay, so number 1 is your customer segment. That basically focuses on who needs your help, what problem do they have that's worth solving. Next one is your value proposition statement. So what is the gains that you deliver to them? What are the pains that you alleviate for them? Next is channels. How do they actually purchase your product? Where do they see it at? Is it online, or is it in store, or another method? Customer relationships. How do they find out about your product? How do you get them as customers? How do you keep them as customers, grow them as customers? Revenue streams. What's your strategy for making money? Key resources. What are the things that you need to actually deliver that value to your customers? What do you need to do to deliver that value? And then what are the non-key activities that you can maybe outsource? And then finally, your cost structure. So I like to go through that because for me, it was very eye-opening to know that your customer segments and your value propositions are the one that you work on first. I hear a lot of people say that they think they need to focus on product development, or maybe they need funding. And actually you start off with who needs your help and why do they need your help, your customer segment and value proposition, because that's the foundation from which everything else will stem from. And then your cost structure, a lot of people have that as a barrier to starting, when it's actually the last thing that you should actually be considering or worrying about. And then once you actually get your hypotheses out onto the business model canvas, you also want to be able to test whether that hypotheses that you have for why you will be successful is actually correct. So the first half of the business model, well, it's technically the second half of the business model canvas, is what you want to focus on first. And those 5 categories over there are considered the things that you need to figure out to create and generate value. And then the other half, the part that you worry about last, is how do you generate efficiency to deliver that value? So I wanted to give a little example of a business model canvas, just so you can see how it is actually applied to a business. So first, this is the business model canvas for Airbnb, and I want to shout out the teaching entrepreneurship program that I believe is ran by a man at John Carroll University. So I actually took this from their curriculum, and so for Airbnb, the example is your customer segments are budget travelers, travelers seeking unique experiences, and then homeowners. So for this one, you have what is called a multi-sided market. You need both of these things to work. Their value proposition, you'll notice that for each customer segment, the value proposition is aligned for that particular customer segment. So the budget traveler wants to save money while traveling. Travelers seeking unique experiences, want unique traveling experiences, and then homeowners want to earn additional income. And then how do people actually use get the value? Either through referrals, word of mouth, social media, and advertisements. And then they make money off of booking fees. Some of the other things, key activities, what do they actually need to do to deliver that value? Software development, homeowner support. I'm sure there's probably standards that the homeowners need to abide by, and also some legalities. Traveler support. How do you make it a seamless process for the customer? And if you've ever been at Airbnb, you can chat with the actual homeowner through the app. Key resources. What do you need to get the business going? And I think for this presentation, what I'm really gonna focus on are the first 5, your customer segment, your value proposition, channels, customer relationship, revenue streams, and then a little bit about the key, what I like to think of as a key wrap, the key resources, activities, and partners, and then cost structure. So I can also send this presentation and share it when it's done if you want to look a little bit more thoroughly, but I at least wanted to give you an example so you can realize how it's used with an actual company. So you have to get your ideas out of your head and get them on the business model canvas. So how do you actually go about generating these hypotheses? So first, why do hypotheses matter? They let you know what to test. So for you to figure out, is this belief I have actually correct about why my business will work or fail? It'll help you prioritize what you need to know. It'll let you know when you're right and you're wrong, which again will help you turn your hypotheses into facts, and then help you know when to pivot. What makes a good hypothesis is a statement. It answers a question. It doesn't ask one. It's testable, meaning you can validate or invalidate it. It can't be infallible. For example, if your hypothesis is that I believe that people want to be safe. Well, I don't think there's a person in the world that say, I don't want to be safe. So you need to figure out, what about that level of safety do people want or do they not want? And then all of your hypotheses should actually tie back into your business model canvas. So first, we're going to focus on getting clear on your hypotheses for your customer segment and your value proposition, and then figure out what's the method for actually turning those hypotheses into facts. So next, you want to get clear on your customer's problem. You want to know what are the pains or frustrations of the customer, whether technical or emotional. What tasks are they trying to perform or complete, whether that's personally or professionally, and in their own words. In their own words is very important because that'll let you know how to communicate back to people. I like to give the example of, say I'm trying to sell some jeans, and I was trying to sell it to my grandfather, who was 89 when he died in 2004. And if I was trying to sell, let me rephrase that. If I was trying to sell the same thing to me and him, if I were trying to sell it to my generation and I said I was trying to sell breeches, my generation would be like, you're trying to sell what? My generation would maybe call them jeans or pants. But for my grandfather's generation, they would call it breeches. So knowing how to communicate and understand from the perspective of your customer, maybe what are some obstacles that prevent the problem from being solved, or why it isn't being solved, and then what happens as a result of the problem not being solved. So an example of a good problem statement, I use an example from Netflix, and from the customer's perspective, going to the video store is a pain. People don't like traveling back and forth just to rent a movie, and they hate paying late fees even more. So an example of a not so good problem statement seems like it uses a little bit more jargon, and it's more theory based, or maybe how you feel like you would communicate to somebody in business terms. And it's the video rental industry has a categorically broken distribution model when delivery video based content to customers, when delivering video based content to customers. So you want to actually make your problem statement very personal. You want it to be reflective or relatable to the customer experience, and the problem that you're trying to solve should be the biggest problem from the perspective of the customer. So you shouldn't be trying to solve multiple problems. Your problem statement shouldn't have the problem is this and this. Right now, for your own ideas, I'd like you, if you have a pencil or paper, or even if you want to share it in the chat, which will be very helpful. So that way, if we have question and answer at the end, we can understand a little bit more about what you're trying to do. So I would like you to take a minute or two and just write out, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, the singular problem that you're trying to solve. Does anybody want to share? Okay. Thank you, Angela, for sharing. Anybody else? Going once? Going twice? So after you've gotten clear on what your problem is, you also should get clear about who your customer segment is, because it isn't everyone. So what makes a good customer segment? First and foremost, it's an actual person. Some people would say it's the YMCA, or it's the hospital, but it's not an institution. It's somebody in that institution, or if you're selling more B2C, then you actually might want to think about what are the demographics, of the actual person. A good customer segment will actually, for your first iteration, should include whoever your early adopter is. That is a more specific and well-defined group from your mainstream adopters, because your mainstream adopters are going to wait for proof from the early adopters. So the early adopters are people who have the problem, they know they have the problem, and they're currently trying to solve the problem. Whereas your mainstream customers, they may have the problem and know they have the problem, but they aren't really like scrambling or willing to try anything to get it solved. So your customer segment might also be an influencer that helps make the person purchase decision. I like the example of maybe a kid's app or a kid's toy. It might be the babysitter that influences the actual parent to purchase something for the kid to make her job easier, which goes into a good customer segment includes someone whose performance or job metrics or pay could be improved by your product or service. And then also think about commonalities with your customer segment, especially if it's more, well, actually it doesn't matter if it's B2C or B2B, but definitely if it's B2C. And they should be able and willing to pay for it. So I want you to go ahead and write out who your customer is. Again, you may have multiple customers. And it might be easier to also think about, to help you define who your customer is, by thinking about who your customer is not. So I'll give you a few minutes to say who your customer is. And then again, if you want to share in the chat, that would be helpful for the Q&A portion. I learned something new today. When you present, you can't see anybody's picture. It's like I'm literally just talking to the screen. So again, your customer segment is a person. If you can define them by a job title, that's great. They should have the problem, know they have the problem, currently trying to solve the problem. Thank you for the smiles. Their job is improved by you helping them. They should have some money, and they should be able to make the decision to also pay. And then Elyse, I will give you free reign to jump in if you want to. I know you said you could call on me, but if there's something you want to jump in on.
I think you've got everything covered perfectly right now. So
okay. So next thing you want to. Sorry, I'm reading the chat. Okay. So what makes a good value proposition statement? It says what the direct benefits of the customers are. It's stated as value from your customer's point of view. I'll phrase another way. An example I like to give is I used to work for Suarez Corporation Industries. They're headquartered down in Canton, and they sold and made these heaters. And I could tell you a feature. I could say it has these infrared heating elements. It has these, what do you call them? The copper, hold on. Now I'm stumbling on the words. Copper heat exchanger. I could tell you had an antimicrobial filter. I worked there over 10 years ago, excuse me. But the customers didn't care about that. They wanted to know, is this gonna help me save on my heating or cooling bills? That's the benefit from their point of view. You wanna be concise. It should be specific and, if possible, quantitative. So you should know exactly, how you're helping the customer. You should know what pain you're alleviating and what you're helping them, what desired outcome you're helping them gain. And sometimes it's not always about time or money savings. Sometimes it comes down to how do they actually compare two different items, and that might be the value that you focus on delivering, even if you do offer a significant time or cost savings. And it should be uniquely delivered by your team. This is where competitive analysis comes into play. We recommend people do a quick Google test to see if there's something out there that already offers that value, and then decide how you want to be different. Down here, we have a popular framework for developing a value proposition statement. I think developing this is very important. And then it'll help you communicate your ideas, but also help people understand what it is that you're doing, and specifically for them. So I'll give you maybe about 2 minutes, 3 minutes to actually fill out the value proposition statement that's listed there. And then if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. You can also write out the value proposition statement and put it in the chat. So if you have a multi-sided market, keep in mind that for each customer, you'll have a different value proposition. So you may need to write multiple value proposition statements, or even for for now, focus on the end user maybe. And Angela, for your customer statement, I like how you even further refined it to women who are mothers or women who are mothers and in the service industry. Definitely want to try to get as narrow as possible with your customer segment, and your value proposition should be like singular in value. It's that one thing you're really helping them with, or that's solving that number one pain that they have. I see it's working. All right. Does anybody feel like they need more time? You can type yes in the chat if you do. Okay. So now you have your hypotheses for your customer segment, what problem they have, and your value proposition. So your actual first step in participating is going to be to search to figure out if that's true. And how do you do that? You actually get out of the building and you go and talk to customers. So for the first part of the journey, you're going to do your customer discovery. That's really going out there to figure out what are the problems that your customer has. So then you get closer to having problem solution fit. After you're sure you have problem solution fit, you understand your customers, then you're going to go on a customer validation. Validation is about having your MVP, your minimal viable product, taking that back to customers and figuring out if your solution actually solves that problem. And once you actually go through that iteration process of, redefining or rebuilding your MVP, and you get that down to the point where that your solution is solving the problem, then you can go on to, and at this point you'll have product market fit. You know that it works for the market. You want to go on a customer creation. This is where you spend more money on sales and marketing at this point. And then hopefully in between this phase and the next phase, you have business model fit, which is making sure that you have a repeatable, scalable, and profitable business model. So what do you actually do to test your hypotheses? You talk to customers, you generate questions based off your hypotheses with the goal of those hypotheses turning into facts. The definition of a startup is a temporary organization in search of a repeatable, scalable, and profitable business model. And the method, if I click my screen, the method for which you go from turning your hypotheses to facts is kind of like the scientific method. So you start off with your hypothesis, or this is your guess about why your business will succeed. You develop those interviews to actually get information from your potential customers to figure out if your hypothesis is validated or invalidated. At that point, that's when you're assessing and analyzing those questions. And then you figure out if what you're hearing is in line with your original hypotheses, more than actually it should change. So at that point, you should say, actually, what I'm hearing a little bit more is of this, and so I'm going to change my hypotheses, and you're going to go back up to the top and go down the process again. But you have all these hypotheses about why your business will and won't work. You have, even if you just narrow it down to your customer segment and value proposition, you might have all these ideas about who your customer segment is or what value that you're delivering to them is. So how would you can't interview people all day. So how would you guess that you might prioritize which hypotheses that you have to test? Any questions in the chat? Okay, so how you prioritize it is figure out which hypotheses do you have that if they were not true, your business will fail. You wouldn't have a business, because you don't want to test other hypotheses and then you find out, oh wait, that assumption that I had wasn't even true. So even your most fundamental assumptions, you want to test those first. So the purpose of customer discovery is that whoever understands their customer best wins. So this is why empathy and really trying to listen to your customer and understand them is important. I hear people going out to do customer interviews, or when it gets to the point of doing customer interviews, they're scared and oftentimes they're afraid of rejection. But I believe there's truly, like, if you do it right, you should be willing to accept rejection, because that not going down that path is going to save you a lot of time and money. So again, keep in mind that you want to have your vision in mind and why you're doing it, but be willing to change the how. There's a quote that I like that says, you don't try too much to change human behavior, you leverage it. So you want to understand what are their current behaviors and what are their past behaviors, because that will help you determine if what you're trying to do is too big of a jump, or you may have assumptions that's not based on any actual factual data. It could be all hypothetical. So a generic question set that I like that ties directly back into your value proposition statement, which includes your customer segment and value prop. It's just to ask them, what are the current processes for doing things? What kind of problems do they have? What's the hardest part about that problem? Because that'll tell you what kind of emotions that they have. You ask them, why is that the hardest part? That'll give you an understanding of what will influence their behavior change. So you can go through that process and start off general and just ask them what are their problems that they have. So out of their own mouths, you understand what they prioritize as problems. And then also, if they don't say something that you're wondering if it's a problem, you can actually go back in and ask them about that specific problem. So tell me a story about a time you had a problem with this, and then you can ask them what's the hardest part to make it out what you actually want to test. So next, you want to understand, what are you currently doing to solve that problem? That'll let you know about your competition. Why did they decide that solution? That'll tell you, maybe what considerations went into searching for the solution. You want to know why that solution isn't sufficient. That'll help you understand what your solution should address. And then also getting a little information about how they found out about the current solution, because that'll tell you how to market to them or gain them as a customer.
Hey, EbaNee, can I jump in with one additional point on our our list of generic customer questions?
Yes.
So one of the things that I think sometimes feels overwhelming for people also is there are a lot of questions that you're trying to learn the answers to. So I think you've laid this out really, really nicely, because what I would typically do is start at the top of that list and try to kind of get as many answered as you can during a customer interview. But my experience has been that early on, you might only get to those first items, right? So you learn a little bit about who your customer is, how they describe themselves, especially if you're selling to another business. So what we call a B2B sale, finding out, what job title they use and how they kind of describe their role in an organization can be really helpful. And then you learn a little bit about their problems and the emotions behind those problems. And it's perfectly fine if you do interviews where you don't get to every single item. The goal isn't to try to learn everything you possibly can about your customer in one interview. The goal is to do 100 interviews, and over the course of those, to learn all of the bullet pointed items. But I think don't be intimidated, or if you're somebody who's doing customer interviewing for the first time, even if you only get 3 questions answered, you're still walking away with a lot more knowledge than you had before. And as you repeat that process, you're going to learn a lot.
Mm-hmm. And the first couple of interviews are actually going to teach you about how to do the rest of the interviews, because they'll be using language you didn't even know about. So especially for those first interviews, that'll help you frame how to maybe even get more information and dig a little deeper on the following ones. So thank you for that tad bit, because if it were me, I would be like, I need to get through all of it. So sometimes time won't permit, especially if they go on and really helping you understand their current process. So after you have gone out, you understand the problem, you understand exactly who's more specifically is your customer, you're gonna actually have to go through a process of iteration, like I said before. So you want to be able to analyze your interviews and figure out if there's a pattern that you see with the problem. Also, take note of if a lot of people are actually trying to solve that problem currently. And then the whole point of it is that you shouldn't be making decisions or changing any part of your business model based on a gut decision. It should be based off data. So it will change because you don't know everything about all of the customers or from their perspective. So if your business model doesn't change, then that's a problem. And I've actually listened to a podcast by Steve Blanks, and he was saying that usually the most passionate entrepreneurs are the ones that are more likely to fail. And you would think it would be the inverse, but it's because the passionate entrepreneurs, they have this belief about why their business will work, and they don't need to test it. I know it's great. They think that their plan is point A to point B. But actually you'll think something and then you'll realize you were wrong, and you'll feel like you're drowning in your own tears here in the middle part. And then hopefully you come out and you're at the top of the hill, standing in the sunshine. But that process should change from you understanding your customer and your customer's problem. So now you have your customer segment and your value proposition. You're clear on them. And then next we're going to go into actually developing your solution. But before that, does anybody have a guess about what is the leading reason that startup businesses fail? You can put them in the chat, or you can take your mic off of being muted. There's no wrong answer either. Oh. Someone's knowledgeable. Okay. So it's lack of customers, lack of market need. So it's that you have, you know, this idea about why it will work, and then your customers are like, oh, well, I don't want to pay for that solution, or I actually don't need that solution. It actually doesn't really solve my problem. So it's like you're building something that actually isn't for the customers. They don't want or need it. So that's why the customer discovery process and actually validating or invalidating your hypotheses about your customer segment and value proposition are so important, because if you don't have that foundation right, you're going to be so much more likely to fail. So now you understand your customer segment and your value proposition. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but you're not at this stage, and you're going on to this stage where you actually want to build your MVP, your minimum viable product, to be able to take that back to your customers and figure out, did that actually solve the problem? So for the MVP, you are selling the vision and delivering the minimum feature set to visionaries. It's not everyone. Again, these are the people who see the promise. They're currently searching for a solution. They're not your mainstream market. So the purpose of your minimum viable product is to see if your solution matches or actually solves the core pains of your customers, and to deliver the desired gains to your customers. It's also the easiest way to test your most important hypotheses. And your MVP should be based on what's the highest return on investment that you can get with the least amount of risk. So what's the smallest possible feature set that could be shipped on day one, and it'll solve that main problem that your customer has. So also, Elyse, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to say.
About the MVP? No, I think that's a good overview.
So before you ship your MVP, you have to understand how to link with your customer segment to deliver that value. So again, you have your customer segments and value proposition statement. You want to understand next which channels your customers, you'll actually be delivering your value to your customers. How will they get it? So channels are all about how is your solution sold. It can be sold via web channels or physical channels. But the most important part is that you can't afford to pick multiple channels on day one, but that doesn't mean that you can't expand to other channels. So how do you pick a good channel? Maybe there's a pathway to get a bigger market share or get more customers. Maybe you pick the one that requires the least amount of investment to deliver it. Maybe you pick the one where you have a little bit more control and you're able to be more agile. Or you consider how long it would take to actually build a relationship with a customer or distributor through the channel that you want to select. So having those kind of questions will help you decide which one which channel you should go to market with first. And then next, you want to focus on your customer relationships. That's that fourth component of the business model canvas. It's all about how do you get, keep, and grow customers. This is the picture here. You can Google online, get, keep, grow customers, and this funnel will pop up. It's called a sales funnel. So for your physical channels and your web channels, you may have a little bit of a different method to getting customers. For example, if it's a physical channel, maybe they see an advertisement or a billboard somewhere, and then they might go to your website, and then they might put it in their cart, and then they might actually purchase it. And then maybe you send them emails to keep them as customers. Or if you switch to the other side, I'm even thinking about cable. Maybe you unbundle their services. You don't offer them all. Maybe you upsell to something else. Maybe you can get better internet, cross-sell. Cross-selling, I think of home appliances. So when we sold the heater, we might also try to sell you a humidifier. And then the best way to get customers is actually referrals. So on the website, it looks the same, but with a few fewer steps. For the sake of time, we'll go on to the next part, which is revenue streams. And again, we really wanted to focus on 1 through 5 of the business model canvas, because that's really your foundation. And then your revenue streams is like, what's your strategy to actually make money? There's multiple different strategies that you can use, but also in your revenue streams is figuring out how do you actually price it. How do they pay for similar products today? How much do they pay? You want to also consider in that how, if their pricing is going to be fixed, is that like if you buy this product is always going to be this, or maybe it's based on volume. If you buy X amount of this product, then it costs this, and X amount is this. And then dynamic pricing is, do you negotiate this? Can I go into a car dealership and is my price not fixed? Or is it buying furniture or at an auction? So now at this point, if you are very concrete on who your customer segment is, your value proposition, you have your MVP, you know how to get it to them, and they're willing to pay for it. Once you're pretty certain about that, then you want to go on and ramp up into sales and marketing, and figuring out if you have a repeatable and scalable, profitable business model by figuring out, boom, with the efficiency to deliver that value, are you being profitable? And can you ramp up productivity and get more product to customers? So for your key resources, activities, and partners, your key resources are going to be looking at what unique assets do you have or do you need, whether that's, do you need to hire people? Do you need to purchase some hardware or software? Do you need to get any venture capital, take out loans? Do you need equipment? Do you need intellectual property, whether that's patents or trademarks, et cetera? What key activities do you need to do to deliver your value? That is, do you need to actually make things? If a customer has a problem, do you need a customer support system or process? Key partnerships. What non-key activities can you outsource? So maybe it's that you need to have some kind of customer service program, but do you outsource that customer service job to another company that could source those calls or messages for your company? And then also your partnerships may be somebody that you maybe are a partner now, but they might also be an escape plan for you. So they may be somebody that could actually even acquire your business down the road. And then your cost structure, that's, what do you pay to sustain the business? Your fixed costs are going to be more so if you have a place, then how do you pay the rent? How are you paying the bills? How are you maybe paying for any servers, any hosting, things like that. And then variable costs are like, what are going to be the things that change with your outputs? How much is it going to cost whether you produce this amount versus this amount? So again, hopefully after you go through all of that process, you'll be able to have and know for sure you have a repeatable, scalable, and profitable business model. And then you can start building what might look like a more traditional company that's not a startup anymore. So it's no longer temporary. You can go ahead and build your company because you are sure that you have business model fit. So are there any questions? You can take yourself off of mute.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I so appreciate how you were just really clear. I've attended some other programs, and the way you explain it and the way you kind of clarified the processes was very helpful. Even the way that it was laid out, it allowed me to have a better understanding of the flow of things. And so I just want to say thank you. And I really, really appreciate this. And I've taken some notes, and there are definitely some things that I have learned that I can take back and kind of clarify and tweak some things when it comes to my business. So I want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being
You're
engaged.
welcome.
And I think that's a result of working at my job. But a lot of it, like especially on the customer segment and value proposition part, we cover in our program. The other things I'm not as knowledgeable about on a surface level, but yeah. So I guess I'm taking your thank you and I'm thinking my job because that's what
Yes,
I
definitely. Thank you.
Yes, thanks everyone for coming today. Thank you, Elyse and EbaNee. And like you see on the screen there, there's some more ways to contact both of them and UARF's website. So thank you for joining, and I hope that you learned something. I'm quite sure that you did, since this was very informative.